Welcome to PDGA Radio. Grant Zellner and Jennifer Allen wrapping up the week that was the 2024 edition of the PDGA Champions Cup. Jennifer, this was an event that going into it, we can be candid, maybe more now than we would have been before the event. Going into it, people weren't sure what to expect, right? They didn't know if the course would deliver. They didn't know if the timing of the year would be all that great. They just weren't sure what to expect. And I think that despite the problems we had with weather and some other things, I think it delivered in a humongous way. I think it was really memorable. So my first question to you, playing the role of host/guest today, is what will you remember most about this year's Champions Cup?
It's hard to forget the weather. The weather definitely was memorable for us players having to deal with the delays, and for the men having to deal with playing, old school golf of 2 rounds in one day, basically. So that's something that doesn't typically happen on our major events. But for Northwood Black, I mean, the course looked better than we've ever seen it, or Northwood Gold combined courses. Northwood Park.
There you go. Just that,
North,
that contains all of
yeah.
it.
The course looked absolutely beautiful, trying to kind of go back a few days before the event, when the weather was kind of bad, watching a little bit of old footage. If you look back even at just last year's footage compared at Ledgestone compared to what we played in this last week, the course almost looks like a totally different course. The foliage, was so much less because of the time of year and because of the hard work that everyone did to make the course look so great. And I absolutely loved how green the grass was. Typically we play Ledgestone later in the year, and with, play of the course and maybe hot, a few hot rainless days, the grass is kind of a little more dead and sparse, but the grass just looked absolutely gorgeous. And thankfully there was a lot of it, because then it really wasn't as muddy as we kind of feared it would be on all the holes. There's definitely, water on the course with 1.5 inches of rain that we received the one night. But I think if that would have been later in the year when we typically play Ledgestone, I think the course would have been a lot muddier and harder to play. So I think the course overall looked absolutely beautiful. Clearly, it's one of the most challenging courses we play all year. So I think overall, all the players really enjoyed it, and we did our best that we could out there.
I thought it was interesting. I was looking at hole by hole stats, with the exception maybe of hole 12 and maybe 14. 12 and 14 play. They're among the most difficult holes in all of organized disc golf. And I'm not sure. I'd have to go back to see if either of them was birdied, and if it was birdied more than once or twice in either field. But other than those two holes, as difficult as the reputation of the course plays, I think most players would agree that virtually every hole is birdieable.
Oh,
It
yeah.
might take perfection, but it is attainable. It's just the idea of stringing very many birdies together and of minimizing those mistakes. I mean, there are so many situations out there where, a bogey feels pretty good given what maybe the circumstance was. Like, you get wonky off the tee and it's like, okay, at this point, bogey would be a victory, and hopefully
Hmm.
I can get that stroke back. And it was really fun from a media coverage perspective and a fan perspective, which is sort of the hats I wear, watching players have to grind mentally in that specific way. That's really interesting. It's not so much that, like, I want to see players feel tortured. That's not what it's about. It's about the constant problem solving and the constant, like, taking the lesser of two evils in a situation. I thought that was really, really interesting. And I'm just kind of pleasantly surprised at how well the event turned out. What was, for you, what was Friday like with the weather? We
Well,
have no control over that. So what was it like?
before I forget, kind of touching back on what you just mentioned, I think because the players, we know that about the course, that, yeah, we can birdie
Mm-hmm.
almost every hole, but if you have that as a game plan, be ready to have several bogeys as well. So a lot of us, going into it, don't attack every hole to try to get that birdie. We're playing, down to our mids and even putters to try to
Hmm.
stay bogey free versus attacking for birdies. And that may be the case, maybe more in FPO than MPO. But I believe that Northwood Black, or I keep saying Northwood Black because we always
That's
play it.
okay. We know
Northwood
what you
Park,
mean.
um, the course that we played, like, is unique in that way because there's not a lot of courses that you play kind of defense mode as a game plan, before you even step
Right.
out onto the course. So I think a lot of us know that if you limit the bogeys, you're going to finish well. And unfortunately, the winds kind of even threw a little bit more of a kink into that, especially on hole
Right.
14. Coming off the field there, the winds exposed that hole more than probably any other hole on the entire course. 12 is pretty protected for most of the way. So 12 is just hard because it's hard. But 14, definitely that wind that we had to play through for several days was a huge factor on making par such a difficult score to get.
So not only do you have to grind like you did with the weather conditions, or excuse me, the windy conditions and the hole designs, I want to talk about the weather conditions. There, I'll get it out because Friday for you guys was incredibly unique, just in terms of not only having the delay, but knowing that because it's a major, every effort was going to be made to find a way to play more golf. So I don't know. There might have been other events where they might have just said, you know what, let's come back tomorrow. But in this case, trying to just give the weather the benefit of the doubt, hope that Saturday would work in our favor. You FPO fielders were out there partway through your round and then had a 5 hour break, something like that. Yeah.
I definitely believe that we were sitting in the car for a solid like 4 hours. We did end up, and that's the hard
Wow.
thing with delays is you don't know how long that delay is going to be. So you kind of wait around, try to stay as close as possible. We did immediately, since it was kind of close to lunch, knew that we should probably go get lunch first, because if we went back out, we would probably be on the course for another at least 3 hours, and
Mm-hmm.
didn't prepare enough snacks to for that scenario. So, a lot of us went and got lunch immediately and then kind of waited around for the next update. That came, we thought maybe we were going to start, I believe it was around 1:30, which crazy enough on like the timing, 1:30 it actually stopped raining. But you guys, the PDGA was, watching the radars closely, knowing that another storm was on its way in. So we appreciate that. You don't want to, get all the way back out to the course and then have to leave again. So, having just a little bit of extra time to prevent that from happening is understandable. So once we found out then at 1:30 there was going to be a couple more hour delay, I think a lot of us then knew that we could go, change our shoes and socks, get some dry stuff on, and kind of stretch our legs and move around a little bit more, and not feeling like we couldn't get back to the course on time if there was like a quick start. The one of the hard things at that park is we do have to park pretty far away. And so, you have to wait on shuttles. There's two golf carts shuttling people back and forth. Clearly, we all cannot fit on those. So, I think that was a little bit of a problem, especially leaving the course with a lightning delay. I would say 80% of us were walking all the way back up and out across the street to the parking lot. So, the parking being really far away from the course was a little bit of a hassle with those kind of delays, and making it back to your hole with enough warm up time. Having to plan for that was
Mm-hmm.
difficult.
Sure.
But then the guys, on the flip side of it, they got to lay around in bed all day until about 3 to 4, sometimes even 5 o'clock. Some of the guys finally got to throw their first shot of the day. I can't imagine what that would have felt like. I definitely would have to imagine that a lot of them would rather have just not gone out at all. Like, that's a hard,
Yeah.
mental set in your mind to wait around all day and then have to go throw so late in the evening. And then prepare to get up bright and early, get at the course maybe by 6 a.m. to
Hmm.
finish that second round and then prepare for your third round the same day. So,
Hmm.
definitely some unusual circumstances that we don't have to face often, thankfully. But I believe that all the players were very professional about it, as far from what I heard, and we dealt with it, and everything worked out.
They had to deal with changing conditions on the course as well, the storms that came through, and some of them went through in the overnight hours. So the crew preparing and maintaining the course as best they can with these just deluges of water and the wind would have to go out and locate new branches that may have come loose but stayed up in the canopy and had to either mark them or try to pull them down. I know there were people out there with headlamps on at like 4 a.m. I think this may have been either Saturday morning or Sunday morning or both,
Probably
doing
both.
whatever they could to pull widowmakers down to try to minimize the number of places on the fairway where they had to mark a mandatory relief. Because for those that are listening that aren't sure what I'm talking about, when there's a tree with a large branch up in the canopy that could fall down if the wind gusts just right, if they can't pull it down for safety reasons, they'll draw a big circle basically on the ground directly beneath that branch. And that's a mandatory relief area, meaning if you go in it, you can't just choose whether or not you want to take relief like you might with some standing water or something. You cannot play your disc from there. You have to stay out of that area. They don't even let spectators meander through the area as they walk. Like, you've got to stay clear of it. You've got to come back behind it on your line of play. And on a course like Northwood, having to pull back on your line of play is always a coin flip whether or not that's going to be a bad thing, because it might put you into a place where now your line is obstructed by a tree or something. So you don't want to have to do relief. How do I phrase this? You don't want to take relief unless you have to, because it in so many cases puts you in a worse situation. But they were out, they were doing that. And we ended up with a great day on Sunday, really, Jen. I thought we did. How was it? How did the view look to you watching how things unfolded dramatically on Sunday with a little bit of wind and thankfully no rain? I mean, what did you feel like the competition kind of climaxed at on Sunday?
I believe that Sunday, with that inch and a half that came through during the night, which was insane, like leaving where we were staying, like the roads were just full of mud and debris
Mm-hmm.
from, you could see all the water just rushing down the main streets and clearly through the park as well. And so they really got a very fast downpour of rain that caused quite a bit of issues. And I think the mud, like trying to get a good stance, pushing off your either, your back foot with a drive or a putt, I think became more of an issue on Sunday more than it was in the previous days.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it did, for the most part, drain well, there were a few pretty substantial puddles that kind of look like small ponds out there that players had to choose. And just like Rachel, around the pond, she had no choice, I guess, unless she wanted to go all the way back over, which is like 200 feet away from the basket on hole 13. She had to just completely stand in the water that went up past her ankles, to take her stance. So that's something that, you don't practice very often. You don't practice standing in inches of water to throw. Thankfully, she made the putt. It was an incredible putt to make. But the same thing, you don't really know, pushing off your back foot, you know, how is that going to affect? Is my foot going to kind of stick in the mud? And then it throws off your timing of your arm. Like, it changes a lot of things. And those are just situations you don't really practice until you're in them. And so that was probably maybe even a little bit more of a factor than the wind, because the wind we had been playing in for a few days. So you kind of knew what it was going to do, except for the occasional crazy gusts and
Yeah, we did
Up
get a few
flows
of
and down
those.
flows and spin around flows.
We had some interesting situations. I got to follow a couple of different cards in the morning, afternoon, and more than once saw a player, pick up a few blades of grass and throw them and watch the grass. In one case, the player picked, I can't remember who the player was, picked the grass up and it blew forward. And so they're thinking, okay, tailwind through the disc. And the moment the disc left their hand, gust came up and up by the basket, full on headwind.
Yeah.
Strong one too. And then they immediately picked up grass again, threw it again, and still where they were standing, it was a tailwind. It was just swirling, and that made for a really interesting problem for players to have to solve. Well, let's talk about Evelina and the FPO field first. For Evelina Salonen, a lot of people think that this was her first major win. It's actually not. It's maybe the first major win that you know about. But back several years back, she won the Canapiste Open in Europe
2018, I believe.
in a year. That's right, 2018. And it was a year when that event was considered a major. So she won that event. I found some numbers, Jen. I want to run these by you and see if these jive with your historical knowledge of the game. So 2018, a major in Europe. So not every American-based player necessarily traveled for that. The total field in FPO was 16 players. That was all of them that played in that event. Only 4 of those 16 were rated above 920. Kristen Tatar was in that field. She was 909 rated at the time, sort of early in her disc golf career. And Evelina Salonen beats Tatar. So that was 2018. This year, 48 total players, so 3 times the field. All but 6 of them rated 920 or better, ranging all the way up to Kristen Tatar at 999 right now. So a substantially different accomplishment, I think, for Evelina.
Yeah, I think it just shows, even for us as players week by week now, realizing that what an incredible, and we've been saying that, I would guess, for the last couple of years, but I feel like now more than ever, as an FPO player, we're just having to deal with, there's so many incredible FPO players, so much talent out there of all ages, brand new players that are stepping up to play FPO with us this year are so talented. And so just because this might be their rookie season does not mean that they are not out there playing just as good as some of us veterans, if not better. So we've been saying it for the last few years of like, oh my gosh, look at all the talent. But I think, I'll speak for myself. Like, it's hard to make the cut or to cash at these events now. And that's something I think a lot of the top FPO players have never really felt as much as the MPO players. We know that they go, sometimes 120 players deep of incredible, talented players competing out there. That's nothing that we've ever dealt with. We've had a few of our US women's now that were close to 100 athletes playing at the same time, but I think we're finally, for the first time in most of our careers, really recognizing there's 50 players out here that are so good and every single stroke counts every single week. And it's more difficult than ever to finish at the top. And Evelina's showing us she is very consistent this year so far, and being able to hang in there, compete, and win multiple times this year already. So I think that definitely puts her at an even higher recognition clearly than in 2018, because this talent is just something that we've never seen before.
More and more drama right there around the cut line from week to week in the FPO field. I love it. At the top, a couple of players right on the cusp of breaking through for an FPO major victory. One is Owen Scoggins, who has won PDGA majors, but in the Masters division, she has podiumed now. This was her 4th, second place or third place finish at a PDGA major. That's trailing, though, Henna, Evelina's bestie, Henna Blumroos. She's now up to 6 career FPO major podiums, which right now is the most without breaking through for that victory. And I don't know about you, but as aspects of different players, including Henna and obviously Evelina, we get to watch in real time aspects of their game mature and improve. For some, it's been a mental aspect. For others, it's been a particular like part of the game, putting or power driving or whatever. For some, it's something else. But watching Evelina break through the way she did and watching Henna right there on her heels doing the same thing, I thought that was great to see.
Yeah, it was hard for a friend and a teammate and our women's captain standing there with Henna watching Evelina come up for her victory. Because I mean, yeah, they're best friends. They've been best friends for so long. And that's a very hard position for Henna to be in. Of course, she's so happy for Evelina, but on the flip side, she knew the number of times she's been on that podium. She mentioned that number to me multiple times, standing there waiting for her to finish. And it's just a hard situation because they're such great friends. But to be there, she's putting that pressure on herself. And I had to, cheer them both on and say that, that next one's just around the corner is just as easily there for you. And, your time's going to be just as special. And that's just part of the game. It's really difficult, but she was clearly extremely happy for her best friend, but she definitely was hoping to take the win or even push it into a playoff. Hole 18, she eagled every single time. I didn't check the stats on Evelina, but I'm sure I would have to guess, have eagled it at least a couple of times.
I don't know. I'll have to check that.
We can double check that stat because I'm definitely just assuming that
I
she
know
had a
she
great
had an
look at
eagle putt multiple times.
Yeah,
I don't know if she capitalized on all of them, but
couple of clean shots off the tee there for the FPO and a big drive. We have the distance to make it up that hill for the second shot. Really makes hole 18 very eagleable. We have a high chance of getting that eagle on 18, and so I would have to guess
I think I might be about to blow your mind.
I'm trying to stall for you as much as possible.
I think I'm about to blow your mind. Evelina, believe it or not, she played 18 collectively at just 1 under par. She birdied it one day and parted all 3 other days. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. I did not know that stat. I just assumed she had drop-in birdies every day. Because if you play it clean, it's definitely with our distance off the tee and the second shot up the hill, should be a pretty tap-in birdie every day on that hole. So wow, that blows my mind. So
now,
Henna would have definitely loved to play that for a playoff.
I think Henna eagled it
every time. I said that stat. I did say that stat. I knew that.
I didn't hear you. I was too busy looking at Evelina. I'm over here counting numbers on the end and flipping eagle. Screens.
She hit a huge putt on Sunday to hit that fourth eagle on 18 to push her up, tied with Own in second. So it was a huge putt. I would have had to guess it was on the edge of circle 1, if not outside. I was standing right there.
The Sunday putt?
Yeah, it was definitely a long putt. I would assume Own's very accurate with that forehand. She probably birdied it every round. Did Own get the eagle?
Let's see here. Own birdied. Let's see. Birdie in round 1. Birdie in round 2.
Yeah, it was a pretty soft par 5.
And birdie in round 4.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you play it clean, it should have been a tap-in birdie. So, yeah, that would have been very interesting if Evelina, who chose to go backhand off the tee, I kind of teased her afterwards why she wouldn't just go with the almost kind of very safe, guaranteed forehand off the tee, because her forehand is such a great shot. And she just said, I threw backhand every round, so she went with it. Unfortunately, she did early release into the woods, which put, the pressure on her. She had to get the par on that hole to win, or it would have been playing 18 over and over again. And with those stats, I think we would have went Henna 1, Own 2, Evelina 3. So would have been an interesting finish if if she wouldn't have got that par.
This just makes me can't wait for, that was not a good English sentence, but I'll go with it. I can't wait now for the European Open and then of course Worlds, and they come fairly close together later on this year. This sets the stage for what's going to be a really fun battle in the FPO
Yeah,
field in
and
those
I
events.
think, I mean, there's at least 10 incredible FPO
I
that
agree.
could easily win either one of those. So,
I agree.
it just depends on the course and how it sets up for each of those players, how we're feeling, late in the season, how our bodies are doing mentally, how we're hanging in there after such a
Yep.
long season. So anything can happen, but it will be incredible to watch. I think any of us be able to take home that championship.
Let's talk about the men for just a minute. Unique situation heading into Sunday. All 4 players on the lead card for Sunday's final round, it was their first time ever being on a lead card for a final round at a major. Now, that may not sound like that big of a deal, except when you look at the fact that that hasn't been the case dating all the way back to 1988. 1988 was the last time all 4 members of the lead card in the MPO field were playing on the lead card for the very first time. So Joseph Anderson, Casey White, Ezra Robinson, and Andrew Presnell, all out there under the lights, all dealing with that form of pressure for really the first time ever. And of course, Andrew Presnell comes out with the victory. Here's some things I found about Andrew Presnell. And I don't know how long you have played with Andy and known him. And I call him Andy because everybody was calling him Andy, which surprised me. He didn't look like an Andy to me. And maybe I shouldn't. Maybe that's too informal. But at least the other players were when they'd call for his score or whatever. So maybe I shouldn't do that. I should ask him permission. So Mr. Presnell.
Prez.
First,
just calling him the Prez.
just Prez. He's the Prez. Well, he is now.
It's the election year. He might as well run.
Got my vote. So the first MPO major winner with no previous top 10 in a major since Ricky way back in 2011. So think about that. 4 majors a year, a couple of years, there's been a different number. There was at least one year there was 5 MPO majors I know of. There may have been a year or two where there were 3. But just think about that number dating all the way back to 2011. That many majors, and never once has somebody won that didn't have at least one other top 10 somewhere in their career that maybe kind of got them ready for the stage, if you will. So that's awesome on Prez's account. I know ratings on the pro game are maybe not as important as they are to us in the amateur ranks in terms of figuring out where we stand, but it's still noteworthy. Prez was the lowest rated major winner since Barsby back at 2018 Worlds. And that's not to say that either Barsby or Prez are slouches by any means. It's just kind of the way the numbers fell at this point in the year. So that's great on Prez to peak at the right time. He's also played 97 events before he finally just broke through with his first major or Elite Series win. That's second most since that record has been kept. So that's impressive. Nearly 100 events, and you finally break. That's just a story in perseverance is what that is.
Well, and I think it also just gives everyone hope. Everyone, right. We love our consistent winners, but I think everyone loves to cheer on the underdog, and that just kind of maybe sets people up to start dreaming maybe bigger dreams if they haven't had that dream yet. That, like we said, there are so many incredible athletes playing this game now that week in, week out, if things line up and go your way, you can be the next winner.
Then maybe this is a great stat then to end on. You were just talking a few moments ago about how 8, 10, who knows, women are legitimate contenders for a major. Well, on the MPO side, sort of a similar story. Prez was the 5th first-time major winner out of the last 6 majors. And one of those, the one that throws that off, is Isaac Robinson, who was a first-time major winner when he won Champions Cup and then won Worlds later on. But so even he is still a pretty
5 for 5,
newbie.
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that's incredible. 5 times. So you have to go all the way back, I think, if I remember correctly, you have to go all the way back to Worlds 2 years ago when Macbeth won at Emporia. And then there's been, I don't want to say a changing of the guard, but we've had a lot of first-time major winners. We've had a lot more younger players or newer players or whatever you want to call it in contention. But I will say this, and this was just made me very happy to see. There was a lot of old guard in contention this past week at the Champions Cup. There were a lot of names up that leaderboard that maybe we haven't seen quite as consistently as we once did. Talking about Ricky being right up there. Barsby was having a great week. Paul, coming back from injury, had some really great stretches and was not really out of it until fairly late in the event. I mean, that was really fun to see a course and a situation that had both really experienced players doing well and sort of new, willing to take every and all risk players also doing well. And they're all jumbled up together on that leaderboard. I thought that was a lot of fun. And that kind of got reflected a little on the women's side too, with, Silva being up there and Holland being up there. There were some players that did the same on the women's side.
Yeah, I think that goes back to kind of what we talked about the course. Northwood sets up for playing safe, playing smart. It's not really a distance course because if you're using your full distance, you can definitely bring in a lot more higher scores than lower. And so you may have some of those, not that Barsby can't throw the disc far at all, but he's very consistent. He's very accurate. He's got a lot of knowledge and skill. So I think that kind of opens up the door for anyone, not just like, oh, it's a long throw, distance course or a short wooded course. This course kind of has it all and brings in probably more than so many other courses that we play. It brings in the game of golf, using your brain, making smart, educated decisions. And some of those, like we talked about, is on the fly because literally the wind is changing before you can release the disc. So maybe playing on a course that requires a little extra knowledge, along with, that's our experienced players, along with just the experience of playing in more majors and having that, mind and determination to last all 4 days with that much pressure on. So that may bring in a few more of the experienced players as well.
Well, here we go into a little bit of a gap in the schedule. I'm trying to count as we speak on my calendar. No, not on the Pro Tour schedule, on the major schedule. On the Pro Tour schedule, you get to keep grinding it out.
I was ready.
You get to keep grinding it out. You got an event this week at the DDO and then a week off, unless you choose to play other events before OTB, and then another week off before Portland. But as we know, a lot of pros are filling those weeks off with other events. But in terms of majors, we have, it looks like about a 5-6 week gap here before USAM, followed immediately by Masters Worlds. And from that point on, the gaps are pretty small between majors all the way through the end of the year. So this, I believe, is the biggest gap between majors during the course of the PDGA's major season. So yeah, we've got a little chance to breathe. I think we ended on a great note before this little off season. I don't think it's insignificant that a number of players are taking a bit of time off, some of them because they've, like Simon, having kiddos, but others going back to Europe for a little bit of an extended time. I think that fits this calendar year. And but before you know it, it's going to ramp right back up again. And but until then, the Pro Tour keeps on singing. Then that that Euro swing kicks in on the Pro Tour. Wow. I mean,
it's a constant. Yeah, it's a constant on the schedule, but definitely for the majors. I think the schedule worked out really good for the Europeans. They did set up that schedule well to where, they got to end it, with a bang. For most of us, the women, the second major, the men, their first. Most of them have traveled back home for a little bit of break. Some are staying all the way through the European stretch, which is a big stretch of events over there. I believe Kristen and a few others are coming back, for Portland and maybe a few others before heading right back to Europe. So some of them will be coming back and forth, but definitely I think we all feel like we completed the first big chapter of the book of this season. And there's really not a pause. We're just flipping over to the next chapter and moving right along.
It's the way of the world now at the top of the game. But for the rest of us that only get to watch the top of the game, Jennifer, I'm sure you'll allow me a little bit of a plug. Women's Global event coming up later on in May 18th and 19th. If you're listening to this and you are a woman or you have a woman in your life that's plays disc golf or even has just dabbled in it and you want a good event to get them some experience and seeing what it's like, this is the perfect event to do that. This is a great event for camaraderie and a great event really for the women's game at large, because there are ways that you can compete with other players around the world using ratings. And there's just a lot of great things that go on surrounding this event. And it's only every other year. So this is one of the years. It's May 18th and 19th. If you go to pdga.com/WGE, you'll find all the information that you need, whether you're a player or whether you're somebody putting on the show. So either way, I wanted to make sure to make that plug.
And I will definitely add, let me add in there for those of you listening or friends of a female who might sign up. Do not feel like because you've never played an event that you are not ready for this event. This is probably more for beginner players than any other tournament out there or for any other, level of play. This is your tournament to try the game if you haven't ever. So make sure, sign up, anyone, all ages. It is kind of back that old school most fun wins, because a lot of the events just play the global part of that. So you may or may not get a local trophy. It's not about really taking home prizes. You're going to get a great player pack. So that's your trophy. The rest of it is just to go out and have fun and meet new players and enjoy and learn what disc golf is all about. So definitely take this as your sign to go sign up if you haven't ever tried or just thinking about it or only done one or two. This is your event to please sign up.
That's your sign right there. Jennifer telling you to do it, so do it. PDGA Radio says goodbye to the Champions Cup and looks ahead to the rest of the year, Women's Global and other fun events. And of course, after a little lull, more PDGA majors on the horizon, all kinds of coverage coming your way from all the PDGA's channels. So until then, we will see you soon. Bye.